Hey, welcome back everyone. Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about working on the background here of this one of Miles Morales. So basically, and, I still got stuff that I got to wrap up with. There's no, there's a little bit of rendering right there, but not much rendering yet. The spider webs aren't done, all that good stuff. But I bounced around a bit, and when I got to the background here, I started to work through this, and there's elements I like that's okay, but not really. Those I copied. It just doesn't feel good. It feels boring. It feels like it's going to zap this piece from being as interesting as I hoped it would be. So I just want to show you a little bit of that, kind of behind the scenes of what goes into making pieces like this and how it's not all productive. And sometimes you're just like, you're feeling good about one aspect and other parts you're struggling with. It's just part of the game. You know what I mean? It's just the way it is. So the main thing is to stay productive, stay coming back to the piece and revisiting certain areas of it. And usually something will click. But, it's tough too when you're on a deadline. And I don't have a deadline here, but I'm saying for people that are looking to work in the industry, you really got to find ways to get around this stuff as quickly as possible. What I got here? Let me merge these layers together because I also will keep... let's see, I need to organize this stuff better, but let's go ahead and get all this right out of there. Actually, I want to keep the ledge he's on. I think I can work with that. So let me organize these layers real quickly. I got a different sketch there. So obviously organizing your content and layers appropriately will help tremendously, right? So do as I say, don't do as I do, right? Where in the world? Yeah, see how it just gets a mess? You really got to do this as you go. Okay, there we go. I want all this kind of combined so I can grab just the... Because I don't mind the ledge he's on. So I'm going to grab that. Just kind of click through here. I don't need it to be real clean because I can go back and clean up the edge. Sometimes it's better to just move quickly and then see how you can fix it later. Not always, but sometimes. All right, so I'm doing a three-finger swipe on the screen if you don't know what I'm doing there. And cutting and pasting that. It cuts and pastes into place, which is nice. Okay, so there's that. Oh, and by the way, before we go any further, I do want to say, make sure to check out the links in the description box below for other content. I'm doing written blog posts on my website. I started an Etsy store with digital items. You can also get digital items on my Gumroad. Sorry for the shameless plug, but I got to do it. It's how I pays the bills to keep coming back here and doing free tutorials on YouTube. So if you don't mind, check the stuff out. Let me know what you think. And I always value your feedback so that I know what to make more of, what direction I should head into. It's really valuable for me, so thank you for that. All right, so first off, what I want to show you is that a lot of times it's good to drop in a perspective grid, if not every time. So see that there? And so there's different versions and ways that I'll use this, and I've talked about this in different videos, but I'll show you a quick way that I generally kind of spitball ideas. So I drop in the perspective, and I do want this to be a one-point perspective. I mean, I could probably change it a little, but I'm not going to change that. That's really what I was going for. So I'm going to keep a one-point perspective. You see it all vanishes behind his leg there. But the thing is dropping in different shapes rather quickly to experiment with size relationships and really kind of almost like you're looking at the silhouette of it. So say for instance, I'll just do it very blocky to show you what I mean. So I'm going to throw in a big building here and say there's a bigger window. In the one I just had, the windows were a lot smaller, and I want to show that comparatively as to what that might do to the shot. We got a ledge here, some trim work. I'm not even on the perspective here. Hold on. You still want it to read well, so don't get too lazy here. But the idea is to quickly drop this in so that you can kind of test it. So say we go here and we add this next ledge like this, but then underneath this one we do a fire escape. Now you know what, that might be forced. You're not going to be able to see much of that, so we'll just leave it as a window. So something as simple as, I guess the ledge would be bigger. Try to throw in some different trim or whatever, just enough to where you got a good idea what it might look like. So now what happens here is it's a very different look than the previous one because the building's a lot bigger. Let's see, if we go to the next building, start with the side of that building. You know what? Let's do this. Let's go like this, then bring it out. But still, we're getting the whole side of this building. Might even fit a little window here. And then sometimes, you know, you'll block in a shadow here. You see that in a lot of styles. I don't know if that really matches. Yeah, I guess it does match the light source a little bit. It's almost like the light is hitting him from the top left. So I don't know that you would shadow that side, but I don't know. I think it almost looks like it would work well. It gives a silhouette that makes his leg pop out a little bit, makes the other building pop out. And then the trick here is you got to squeeze in these little windows. Like, it's real easy to go overly wide. I always have this problem, so I have to remember to squeeze them in very, like they'd be ultra thin windows here. It almost seems harder to draw. It should be easier really, but maybe widen it out a little bit more so I can get like a fourth or a fifth window in there, because I feel like 3 would just be too skinny of a building. But you see, like now we've got a different idea in place from what we originally established. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this one now. I'm going to do it again. I feel like that made the scene feel too small. I don't know if I organized it the wrong way or what. It just felt small. You know, and I'm trying to give this feeling of scale where, you know, we're close up to Miles here, but then at the same time, the scene is depthy. And that's why I was going really small with those other details, because again, it generally will convey that sense of scale and depth, because I'm putting in some very small details back here. Just like, for instance, you know, the way I did it before, it makes it feel like he's not very high up, right? The buildings are bigger than, are above him at this point. It almost looks like he's just looking over into this next building, which kind of makes it a boring shot. Now, if I add another version of this, and oh, did I just make an extra layer? I gotta be careful of that. I did, of course I did. Okay, so another way to think about this is, what if we put a bunch of buildings like this? And they'd be smaller. All right, now all of a sudden he's way up in the air. All right, we could push those back here, maybe a couple really tall skyscraper ones over here or something. Just to, again, to give that scale, but now I'm also trying to think about the composition a little bit. And you could fit, you know, the tops of a couple back here. And I would block those in with just a basic shape or a color, because you don't want it to fight, you know, him too much. And then basically for back here, you know, some clouds, or you could even go off into the distance and you could say, well, could you go over the horizon with the horizon? I don't think you could, right? You can't go over the horizon with the horizon. So yeah, I wouldn't want to do that, but you could take, sorry. Sometimes I really got to think of these basic ideas in my head before I talk. But the, you know, you could do some clouds, some birds, and all of a sudden he's way up in the air. You know, all that kind of reinforces that. So I kind of like that, honestly, better than I like the other iterations. It puts them way up there. It's easier to draw, which, you know, hey, that's awesome. So I think I would do that. So now what I could do is take this, and I would still leave the perspective grid, but let me drop it below here. Let me turn this blue layer that I flood filled into a screen layer. And why didn't that work? Hello. It's behind the blue layer, set to normal. And somehow the blue layer did not turn it to blue, or did it? That's weird. It kind of did. Oh, you know what? The opacity is lowered. Yikes. Okay. Still though, that doesn't look as doesn't look great. But anyways, all I'm gonna do is, I've got that set to screen. Whatever color I color this, maybe because it's not so bright. Yeah, there we go. Gives you that kind of non-photo blue look. And then I can 2-finger tap on the layer below, the line art layer, which is very crude, obviously. And I could toggle that back. Now, really, I can get rid of this perspective grid for a minute. Where is that sucker? Right there. Reason being is because if I just add a layer over top of this, actually over top of the blue, so I'm going to hold this. And I don't know why, but my gesture controls just switched on me. I don't know if it was an update or what. So I'm struggling with my gesture controls. So it's before I could hold with the Apple Pencil, now I have to hold with my finger. You have to hold for a couple seconds, then drag it up. So I'm going to go to Drawing Assist. And since these are really simple structures, I'm going to show you a couple ways to kind of process this. One of which is go through with a thin line, and this works in a lot of your, your illustrations. It's kind of like, to me, it's an easier way to kind of process things if you start with a very thin line. I'm not saying it always works. It's just, I don't know, for me it works a lot. So I'm just going to grab some of these shapes with a very thin line, and even a broken up line. That's another thing I like doing, especially with anatomy and character design. I feel like broken up lines help you to envision the work a bit better. It's almost like you're not committing to that concept too early on, and I don't know, something about it just feels right, feels better, easier. So let's go something like this. All right, and see, we're just getting in some of those shapes. I mean, look how scribbly some of this stuff is. Now over here, we're going to get really close to the horizon line, so it's going to get almost tricky to pull in that direction. And then here we're above the horizon line with this big guy over here. Try to break it off and do some different shapes. Just play around with it. Don't get too awfully crazy, because all you're really trying to do is test some of these shapes. Okay, so that's the way I look at this part. I'm just seeing if these shapes will work over here. Something like this, and I could get in here and do all these tiny little, you could do like you ever see those walks that go from one structure to the other? You can play around and do all sorts of stuff. But for right now, I just want the basic shapes to kind of look at, gauge from back here and go, okay, is that going to work? Now, it leaves a lot of negative space around the character. So, again, it's not really like this is the only way to go. You could definitely test some other things. But I feel like what happens here is it simplifies the shot, puts the focus on, Miles here, and then it's easier, So, I mean, those things combined, I think that's what I would go with. But again, the same rules apply for that more detailed, rendering where you get into here and you're drawing these other buildings this way. Same exact rules apply as what I'm doing here. This is just a simple way to approach it. So now what I can do is build off of this. And one of the best ways I feel like to do this is just to keep cutting into the shapes. So, I'd say, all right, this one, I'm just going to cut across here and across here. All right. And I'm just going to draw the sides where they look like they're raised above that top segment. And it's simple as, adding 2 lines on the left side, 1 line on the right, and then on this side, repeating the effect like this. But on this side, I'm going to have the 2 lines over here, or shadow, and then here I can draw over, and then I do two finger taps to undo those. I'm basically just kind of mapping the line that I want, and then hovering my Apple Pencil over that area and drawing across. And you really don't have to do that. But I notice if you don't, me personally, I almost always miss the mark by trying to envision it. So it's for me, it's better to do that. If you want to be very critical, you add a layer, draw your guides, then go back to the previous layer or a new layer, and then draw the clean lines and delete the guide layer. So you can get into this as far as you want. So the other thing is I'll usually establish, just an idea. So in this case, I'm going to draw another recessed area right here, like that. And then probably just a bunch of little windows. And I try not to be overly critical about this, but you can measure these out if you want. So just like that, we've got like another pocket of depth. You could put a shadow in there. I don't think I need it. In fact, we could do that in the color stage. But now at this point, I can easily copy and drop those down. So I'll leave that alone for a second. It's actually harder to get this next set off to the side. But again, I'll map the distance there. I'll draw that into place. Go over here, hover the Apple Pencil, 2-finger tap to undo. Drawing the little shadow here, little shadow there. And these lines should be closer together to give that feeling of perspective. And that's it. And also, you can even copy and drag those down. You have to distort them as you go. It's a little bit tricky, but it's doable. I'll show you on this left side real quick. So And just remember all these little trim patterns. Pay attention to different buildings and just play around with it. There's a lot of them that are super simple that you can, kind of get your wrap your head around, get going with, and then you can always learn more detailed, Victorian, Gothic, and all that fun stuff. I guess if you're going to draw Batman, you're going to have to learn Gothic, right? So, luckily, Spidey is a lot of modern buildings, and modern buildings are usually pretty easy to draw. So, once you get a system, because they're still a pain in the butt. Backgrounds are always a pain, but so like this, I'm going to grab this area right here, just this area, just like that, and I'm going to do a 3-finger swipe, and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to drag it down, and that's really it for this. I mean, why does that look different? What did I do there? I did something wrong. No, not me. First time for everything, I guess. Okay, so, that little shadow's off. I'm not going to let it worry me. I can always go back and fill that in. What I just want to show you is from here it gets really fast. Just duplicate those. I can't talk. That's why I draw pictures, because I can't talk. And duplicate. And I know I'm cheating. I'm such a bad artist, but tell you what, you're trying to get pictures done and get more volume out. You got to find shortcuts. You just have to. So it's not cheating, folks. Just being efficient. And if it bothers you to make it too repetitive, because it does kind of siphon the life out of some things when you get overly repetitive, then you would just take this and change the like a lot of times I like doing stuff like this. So go back to drawing assist on this bottom one, or actually first I'm gonna take that off. I'm gonna combine these together, and I'll show you why here. Yeah, I don't only need those ones because the other one's on the side. I'm just gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna drag this over here. First, I'm gonna give myself some reference layers. So I gotta set my piece off to the side here, and I'm gonna give myself a reference layer. And I could probably get away with doing that on that layer, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna make a new layer, drawing assist, right? And I'm just gonna give myself some guidelines. And actually, I'm gonna line those up to the other windows. And you'll see why here in a second. My goodness, dude, this is madness. No, this is Sparta. All right, sorry. Love that quote. And my kid do. Always yelling that in the house. This is Sparta. With a lot more intensity. I just don't want to blow your eardrums out by me trying to sound like Gerard Butler. All right, so here we go. So now I'm going to bring the, you know what? And actually, I'm going to drag the guidelines. Where'd they go? I'm a hot mess over here, right there. I'm going to drag those beneath the blue line layer, right? So that's a good way to, at least know that everything below that is just sketch stuff. And then when you're done with it, it's easier to delete. Oh, stuff down here is just sketch stuff. I can get rid of that. So you don't have to sit there and name everything, even though naming your layers is a very productive way to work. I grabbed the wrong layer, put that back. Where is it? Right here. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this over, and you're probably thinking, dude, this is taking forever, but it does pick up speed, and I'm explaining it, but I'm telling you, this is faster than trying to draw those little windows in, for me anyways. So I'm going to hit freeform on the left there, and I'm going to drag this. If it would work, it's not working. Why is that? Hello? Oh, my bad. Distort. I think it didn't ever used to be freeform, but anyways, it's distort. So I'm going to drag these to those guides. Oh, and actually I got to bring that down. That. Like that. And you see it totally lines up perfect. No, it doesn't. But you got to grab the corners and you got to pinch it in. Tell you, it teaches you a lot about perspective too, because it has to work if you think about it, because it's all in perspective in a forward-facing shot. It's in a forward-facing shot in a regular way, and then all you're doing is dragging it to perspective technique. Same idea of perspective is that everything converges back to a vanishing point. So it just kind of helps you wrap your head around it. Like, this should work. Why is it not working? Well, then maybe you're not doing something correct perspectively. Now, you see the difference is the windows I established, and this is what I mean by teaching you something as far as perspective goes. I drew those top windows in from my mind, right? I'm like, oh, it's going to be this way. Now, it stands to reason that that side of the building isn't as deep, I guess. So maybe there'd be less windows. In fact, it makes some sense there, right? But if this was a squared building, then the new windows that I just distorted into place would be correct. You see what I mean? And you'll get it more as you do this stuff, but you'll start to realize that a lot of times you're just kind of perceiving it wrong. Like, oh, you're like, man, I would have assumed this would have looked this way. And then you distort things or you use certain techniques, you learn more about perspective and you realize, oh, wow, I have a distorted perception on the way this would really be. It just takes time. But anyways, there's our windows. I know it took longer than it probably should. So now, let's go ahead and I'm going to erase this line back right here a little bit. Why is that not erasing? Oh, yeah, you got to be careful. When you're just hitting this, it does not jump layers, obviously. So there. So now what I want to do is just add some more details down here. So I'm going to just take some vertical lines like this. Again, very boring, very basic, very easy. And then let's say that the depth is right about like this. So 1, 2, you kind of get some of the third. It's really close to that other building. I don't like that. I'll probably just nudge that other building over. Or I'd have to nudge this over. Does that look right? Yeah, it's not bad. Okay, so right there. And then same thing over here. I need to really squeeze these in. And I'm just guessing here, you know. Let's say something like that. And then you could cut lines over. I want to go to another building, but you see, it's real simple. You could just cut more lines this way. I'll tell you, there's a lot to be said too for not being so awfully critical about this. You see, I'm really zeroing in on this building, but I'm trying to teach you techniques here, so keep that in mind. A lot of times, it is best to stay back. I mean, look how small that building is. It is best to stay back as much as possible. And then as these buildings get off into the distance, you really can just imply a lot more than what I'm doing here. But again, I'm trying to show you techniques. So hopefully you don't look at this like, oh yeah, I got to zero in on every building like Rob's doing right there. That's not what you should do. In fact, there's a lot of times you can just get away with some hints of the detail, especially the further it gets. You got to figure that you have things like atmospheric perspective, or volumeric perspective. Yeah. Anyways, what I mean by that is that the atmosphere starts to envelop the objects. So that's why if you see something off in the distance, it starts to take the color of the sky. Buildings do this, right? And it looks better when you do that. And it's actually easier because, again, you're not trying to overly define all this stuff off in the distance. You wouldn't want to take this building back here and put a bunch of harsh lines and overly define. It would look weird because we just don't see that way. Our eyes don't work that way. Again, in the atmosphere, as things are taller, it happens even more, right? So if you see like a cool shot in a comic, pay attention to how when they raise the buildings into the sky, they generally will blend the colors and the clouds, or not really the clouds, but the colors of the sky over it, and it looks better. And even blurring it a little bit. And obviously, like if you're looking at a character like this, you don't want all these buildings in the very background to be high detail. You want the detail and the focus to be on the hero. So, yeah, just things to think about. And remember, too, for all the tiny little windows, even if you want to get those in there back here, just remember to do a grid pattern first. Oops. Something like this. And you'll see a lot of artists just leave this, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to do, but if you do that to every building, it's going to look really lazy, I guess. So what you can do is you can just, on a new layer, you'd put this as your guide layer, drop it below the blue like I showed you before, and then you go through each one of these And again, you don't need to make it so defined. You could, if you find it easier to start this way, then start this way, and then you can always go back and erase back some of the details so it doesn't look so defined. But see how I'm just getting the shadows to the one side? And then, let's see here, we are above or below? We're almost seeing the top of that building. So we would see, what is it, the bottom of the ledge. Just a little bit though, it's probably too thick of a line. But again, I'm just kind of trying to show you the technique. But you would go piece by piece, and it gets a lot, it's a lot easier than trying to draw a window floating there and then map the next window and the next window. It always looks weird. But if you do it this way, it's pretty doable. And then I would probably put maybe a little segment. I don't know if you'd even see a segment that far off. That's probably too much. Let's see what it looks like right now if I come back and just erase the middles, the connecting lines, because right now it just looks like a weird grid pattern. And there's times I'll kind of get into this and I'll just go back and forth and draw and erase all in the same layer. It just depends on how I'm feeling. So the whole guide layers and the blue line stuff, that's up to you. There's times I do that and there's times I don't. There's times I just start drawing and having a good time with it, and I just get in there and do the thing. And so you see like that, it kind of works. The windows look a bit wide to me. I'd probably thin those out just a little bit, and you can still work off what you have here because they're kind of centered into the areas you need them. Well, again, as long as you're consistent about the way you would cut into these, you know, maybe work on both sides, thin it out, and then bring your line in to that new area, you can actually cut into these just fine. And if the building looks too plain, like that one looks, I guess it could be like an apartment building or something, but it looks really plain, you can always just add some trim. And say this is, you know, you've got your windows too close to the edges, there's no reason you can't just add some edges this way and then rebuild your perspective back. There's just so many ways to look at this stuff. And then it always helps to put like little structures on the top. You got to think of like air conditioning units and heaters and water towers and, you know, just stuff like that. I mean, the more you add of that stuff, the more interesting your scenes are going to look. Now this one I've got perspective toggled on, so let me turn that off for a second. I got like a little water tower thingy up here. You could add like a, let me put the perspective back on now. You could add like a little sign off to the side. I mean, yeah, I'm way back there, so I don't know if I should be filling in detail on that building back there, but I just want to give you ideas. I would at least add the air conditioning units on the tops of the building, so nothing worse than seeing a shot like this, and you've got these structures like this one right here with nothing on the top. I mean, there's got to be fans and couple little things just to make it look like a building. And then these ones back here, I usually do like, you know, the big light posts for the planes, for low-flying planes, drones. Look out, there's a building. Freaking drones everywhere. Okay, so yeah, so that's basically it. And I mean, I can go on, but this is already getting lengthy. I feel like this is the way I'm going to take it. Who knows? I might redraw another version just to check, see if I like this. But I think I'm liking this, and it'll allow me to wrap this up rather quickly. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with this, where I was trying to do that other type of shot as I showed in the beginning of the video. But I feel like this will do the trick. I could add a few more big buildings back here, I think. You know, just so it feels a little more interesting. Probably get into just silhouettes back there. Maybe a couple over here. You know, I could add like a couple birds or something. Whatever. You know, and actually probably, you know, make the birds larger and just have them up close. You know, like, or one up close and a couple little ones, silhouettes back here, whatever. Just something else to really push that, you know, that height. But it's obviously already conveyed pretty well with just the buildings and the size of him. Now, he does look a bit like a giant. I guess that could be a way to look at. But I don't know. I feel like this is a good way to finish this piece. But let me know what you think. I mean, why am I asking myself when I have you amazing people watching the video? If you've watched this long, comment below and let me know what you think. Do you think the shot should look different? What are your ideas? Maybe we need to start a way where you guys start sending me shots of what you think. Send it to my website. I have a contact form on there, and then I can look at the stuff and I can introduce it into some of these videos. Say, like, hey, so-and-so had this idea and I really like, again, the feedback and the communication is essential. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. I'd love to know what you think. And as always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.